Anyway, she works together very closely together with another architect, Ue, and I can't remember his other name right now. And together they are Sana, one of the most celebrated architectural offices at the moment. They designed, amongst other things, the new museum in New York, which you probably all know, that silver sort of box-like thing in East Village. So part of what they really wanted me to do was to film. He was constructing a different, very, very different project on a different island in the same area. So they wanted me to film both islands for her Venice Biennial. And I said, yeah, but I don't sort of really make, commission work like that. I can't, just do what you asked me to do. I sort of said I would much prefer to concentrate on one island, and this one, because I liked it very much. But they sort of were very insistent and sort of said, no, we really want you to do both. And I think it was sort of all this sort of touchy sort of area of he also needing to have some screen time sort of thing. So I said, well, look, okay, I'll do that for you, providing you let me make my own work as well. And so they said, okay. And so this is actually the second work. I made a double screen installation which was shown at the Architectural Biennial, and that is now owned by this museum foundation, which is in Naoshima. And after that I went on and made this piece, sort of more for me.
So is that Cloud Island 1 and...
Yes.
Or Cloud Island 1?
It has a really long title. Cloud Island 1, project for the Architectural Biennial in Venice in 2010. That's the whole title.
Okay, so and for this work, this is conceived as a single channel projection, yet for a spatial installation.
That's right.
Usually.
Yeah. I don't show this normally in a sort of a cinema situation like this, or in a screening like this. There are sort of several reasons why I do that. When I show it in a gallery or in a museum setting, I do sort of go to quite a lot of care of how I design the room. That's grey carpet on the floor, and then there are all these grey and white cushions that you can sit on, and the projection is also lower than normal. So it's sort of a cosy, informal, intimate atmosphere, almost like a sitting room in someone's home. And that low down thing is this very Japanese. You notice all the woman crawling around on the floor all the time. That's a very Japanese thing. And so I sort of want to provide this rather comfortable cocoon which will invite you, hopefully, to take the time and look at not much happening for a rather long time.
I will get back to that question of space and the relation to space in sculpture, but I want to continue first, as I said, with sort of the content aspect. So you've already said how you were invited, how you were introduced to this island, or actually the two islands, so that particular relation. But I mean, I think the first time I read in some catalog entry you've been to Japan was in 2010, not 2010, 2000 or 2001, on the occasion of an exhibition in Kyoto, and that led then later on to the production of Saint Sebastian.
That's right, yeah.
So, and I was wondering, since you said you usually don't do something commissioned, but there is a relation to that space. And that didn't just grow out of this being introduced to this island. So...
Do you mean the cultural space of Japan? Or
more like you've been to Japan a few times, and you made Saint Sebastian, which grew out of an encounter. It wasn't planned, I think, when you first went there.
No.
So that sort of investigating a space, and I think also that in terms of the story of this island, which is very particular and yet also very specific for Japanese.
Well, I mean, things come along your way. Things come along your way that you hadn't planned. But I know when I bump into something that's important to me because all these bells start ringing in my head of, oh, hang on, but this is really important because I'm working on this and it's interesting, and the hunch that both the curator who works at the MOT in Tokyo and Kazuo Sejima had, that I would like this island, was absolutely correct, because it's fantastic, very special little human-sized place, and actually I'm going back there. I was just thinking while I was watching it again. I'm going back in. I'm lucky. I'm going back in December because I'm allowed to install the piece on the island itself, so it'll get rather self-referential. So I'm going to have to deal with what the people who are in the film think of it. Also, I know that particularly the old lady, Mrs. Tugita, she will have a lot of criticism. And I'm sorry, I'm good timing. I'm getting a little bit off track.
The story of the island, in terms of its, we see there remnants of an industrial past. I felt that I had to make this piece because I felt that I had been given access to this island at an extremely particular moment in time. This island does have a very, very particular, it is quite a clear example of what is happening in rural Japan at the moment. This is like post-agricultural, post-industrial, so like actually anywhere in industrialized, westernized world, the countryside is sort of like dying out, becoming deserted, and old people are left behind. I mean, this is a big problem in France also. This island is maybe trying to reinvent itself because it's turning itself sort of into a museum. 100 years ago, there was this, you see the ruins of it in the film, there was this copper refinery. Before that, there was a granite stone quarry, which is actually still there. I think it's only just being stopped being used. And there were several of them because it's a very famous granite in Japan. If you talk about Inujima granite, they all know instantly what you're talking about because the royal castle in Tokyo was built with stone from this island, and the castle in Osaka was built with stone from this island. And then before that, obviously, it was like fishing and farming. It's a really small island. You can walk around it in about 20 minutes. So in its heyday, when there was this copper refinery there, which is also a bit weird when you think about it, because there was no copper on the island itself, but it was quite on a good shipping route. There were approximately 1,000 people living on the island, and it must have been incredibly busy, bustling, noisy. I've seen this beautiful photo of all these ships lying in the harbour and all this smoke coming out of all those chimneys. And now the average age of the inhabitants is about 70. There are no children on the island. There's no one on the island under the age of 60, I think. And the population is about 50. And what I found really amazing was that it's very visible. You can see all that. You can see this really lovely, beautiful little village and this very nice tiny little community. They know instantly about each other what's going on. And this thing of the ferry coming and going, and it's like the highlight of the day. At the same time, the houses that get deserted because someone moves away or because someone's died, they just get left to very slowly collapse next to houses that are cared for and gardens that are looked after. And that's, I find, a very different take on time and on time passing than
than we tend to have. At least in Holland, everything always gets cleaned up. And Ordnung muss sein, alles muss sauber netjes, zeggen ze. Ja, alles moet netjes. And the Dutch are very much into reallocating space and rebuilding, building up new developments where old ones had been. So things, you can't just let things go. So I was, and at the same time, so you've got that, you've got life going on, you've got life that used to be, and now you've got this new development of these, they're sort of almost like jewellery, I was thinking, a bit like schmuck, these pavilions that Sejima has designed. And what I really like about the architecture is it's like a museum without the building. So rather than having this big, impressive building which says, I am a museum, written all over its facade, she sort of left out the building and just done rooms where you can show art scattered throughout the village. So you also have to walk through the village to be able to encounter these pavilions. And I think that's really nice. And so they're sort of all of a sudden popping up like mushrooms in between too. And the island's still quiet. And, people have leased their backyards to this development now. But they also don't know what's going to happen. I'm worried. I'm worried that they'll sort of be feeling now like a bit like monkeys in the zoo because, on the one hand they want public to come and they want their island to stay alive, and on the other hand, is that the right way to go by turning it into a museum? I'm not sure, but I did want to capture this moment in time.
I think in a way it is paradigmatic, although it's unusual that formerly industrial spaces are turned into art spaces. In this case, it's more unusual because it's the industrial heyday is quite a long time past, I think, and so it's like a rural, where it's kind of the hinterland feeling, or sort of, and by the construction of this museum in the space of the village, they will be on display themselves. I think I'm kind of jumping to connect this to other works. I was wondering about the space of the island. I mean, you said rightfully you were interested in that. It's not the only island you worked with, and you've also made a sound work on an island.
Yeah, I've actually sort of been doing quite a lot of island-like works recently, or in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's something that all on its own keeps on cropping up. So I sort of welcome it now. I ended up, I guess it was the first time I made a work called Island in 2007, which is a black and white piece. It lasts about 10 minutes, the loop does. And it's a large production, and it's sort of unusual for what I'm mostly known for. I'm known more for like portraiture and, always filming people. And you don't see anyone in this film at all. And it's filmed on an island of Gotland, which is in the Baltic Sea. It's a Swedish island, where I also happen to come back and forth quite a lot, and I've made a few works there now. And that piece is called Island, and you hear this voiceover of someone describing a woman who's decided to sort of make a retreat there. And gets confronted with all things in her head, really. This idea of the island being an ideal place. But an island is also, in reality, can be quite a sort of horrible place because you can't get away, you're stuck. So it can be very limiting. That's why a lot of young people choose to leave. Brendan's Isle, which is a sound piece which I made after Cloud Island, 2010 also, I actually made on the island of Fur, almost Denmark. And I was researching into this wonderful old Dutch poem about Brendan. Brendan is an Irish monk from the Middle Ages. He lived in 600 something or other, and at that time Ireland was like a cultural centre in Europe. There was a lot of knowledge there, and Christianity came to Ireland very early, and so he was a monk who ended up. He really did live. He founded some monasteries in Ireland, but the story goes that he was reading this book. And the book was telling of all the wonders of the world, and he didn't believe them, all of God's wonders of the world. He didn't believe them, so he got angry and he tossed the book into the fire. And this angel appeared and said, because you doubted God's power and all the wonderful things he's done, you have to go on a journey. And you have to go on a sea journey for 7 years to find paradise on earth. And the belief was that paradise on earth was on an island. So off he goes in a tiny little boat with a few other monks, and he undertakes a 7-year sea voyage, which someone has also copied him doing. There are quite a lot of theories about it, that he actually took what they call the stepping stone route and found his way to America and back. Lots and lots of various interesting theories about what he encountered. That monks did take such treacherous sea journeys at that time is well known and well documented. Anyway, as the story goes, he finds all these amazing islands and probably also experiences an eruption at sea, like, Iceland, the big, I can't remember the name of the volcano, but you all know, when we couldn't fly and all the rest of it. Ash clouds, everything, and encountered whales and encountered an iceberg and all these sorts of things. But the story goes that he, after 7 years, finds this island, goes on land, and lo and behold, it is amazing. It's all the traditional biblical description of what paradise should be. But what I thought was really funny is that he only spends like a day or two there, and then he turns around and goes back home. And since then, his island, this paradise on earth, which he found, Brendan's Isle, people have tried to find it, and people have marked it on various maps. And since then, this island, which has never been properly found, migrates itself. It travels sort of on various dots on various maps. So Ptolemy has it on his map, and Columbus even tries to find it when he sails to America, really, truly. And Batham, when he makes the first globe of the world, he draws this island next to China, and these days it's located close to the Canary Islands. That's where they say where it is. Someone wants to say something.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello, I have a question about the making of the film we have just seen.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So yeah,
off on the tangent there.
Yeah. One question is, how long have you been staying there? And can you talk Japanese? And did you film alone or together with other camera people?
Okay, yeah. Thank you for bringing me back on the topic. I must apologise, by the way. I've just spent 8 days in bed with the worst flu that I've ever had, so I'm feeling a bit sort of weird today. Anyway, okay, how long did I spend there? Well, the first trip I took there, I spent about 12 hours on the island and 18 hours in Japan. I'm lucky because I've been to Japan before and I have friends in Japan and I work with a gallery in Japan. So I had someone go for me to the island like about 3 or 4 times while we were preparing. I quite quickly had this feeling that I wanted to focus on not one person and not no one, but I was thinking 3 to 4 main characters I wanted to have. This is real people, obviously, it's documentary, but still, even in documentary, you try and figure out, who's my protagonist and stuff like that. So I wanted to try and film their daily life, but through these people, and I was hoping that I could figure out some sort of an organic chain of events that one person would take me to the next person, to the next person. And through this you would slowly but surely see the island and their life and the situation now. So we figured out these people beforehand. I was given photographs of them and told all about their lives, and the girl who went there for me, she stayed in their houses, and she's Japanese and is very well bilingual, so that was fantastic. I can't speak Japanese, tiny little bit by now. I filmed with 2 translators and production assistants and a soundman and a cameraman, and we were there 9 days. And what else did I want to say? I decided actually right from the beginning that I wasn't going to do interviews. If they were going to talk, okay, but I felt pretty sure that it probably wouldn't need subtitling, and I'm still very sure it doesn't need subtitling, because I think you can just sort of see, Mr. Nagayama, who waits all day, he's 88, was 88 when I filmed him, waits all day in his shop for customers to come, and he can hear them or see them coming, and then when they don't come in the door, disappointment. He looks a little bit like a turtle to me. Even if he says, something that you don't understand, you can think like, he's saying motorcycle, or, have a nice day, or, you can just, he says what anyone would say in a situation like that, so you don't need the text, it's more the sound, really. Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to come to the question of text or subtitle or not, but very much at the end. The reason why I picked up the island subject was for 2 reasons. One is sort of cinema history. I know the One Island, the Tarkovsky film, and also because there's a little closed tag that says Vivre sa vie, which I only saw now on the big screen, and I was wondering whether you focused that on purpose, the woman who's opening the album. But with the island also the question of like the island is a tiny little speck on a map, where it's a detail, but it's also contained in itself. And the way you work with your camera is very much about working out details. Yes. Like here, it's not about focusing on the people so much. Like mostly you shoot the people here different to your other work, where they're framed by objects. There's a relation to a foreground and a background. And so I'd like to ask about it's very haptic camera work. It also becomes haptic, of course, because of the sound, most particularly the breathing. So. Yeah.
Well, I wanted very strongly to try and sort of, as well as I could, recreate the feeling of being there, actually. So I would hope that the film gives some experience of that sort of timelessness that the island has, and less than who's this person, what's their name, what do they do sort of thing. It's just through the people you can be there, and you can sort of step into their shoes and into their lives for a couple of minutes.
And as for the sound, how did you already said with how many people you worked, but it's not just camera sound, right?
No, but it never
like,
is.
No.
I
can. Did you do extra recording? Is what I'm asking.
Yes, always. Always. Sound is really, really, really important, and I go to great lengths to have a good soundtrack. I also always work with the same sound designer, who I think is very good. The thing with live sound and sound in film is, real sound is actually never. No, let me put it like this: the microphone records all sound within its range, and it is absolutely democratic about that. Stupid is another way to think about it. That means that it will record every little cough in this room and every stupid sound I make, which is actually not important to what's going on. And so a lot of that sound you need to filter out, and when you're making a film or an installation, and you can have a feeling that there were birds singing and even they weren't there, or sound is very much helping the atmosphere of being in a place. So that's also really important. So yeah, I mean the birds were from the island because there's very specific nature there, but they weren't necessarily exactly under that shot at that moment in time.
We've already, the subject of time, Matthias already said that in the introduction, the question of memory. There's something, I'd like to connect it, since this is within the frame of documentary practice in art, to the notion of the documentary. Now you've realized, I believe, 2 films that were as documentary films with television money.
Although some people get mad at me when I say that. It's funny, yeah.
And you've also, in texts that I've read, interviews with you, made very distinct reference to being educated in the Netherlands with a very strong documentary tradition in which you place yourself. You've so in earlier work where you worked with archives, photographic archives, even though they also show up here, it was clear you'd been asked about your relation to the archive and understanding the documentary is the archive. So what's your notion of the documentary in that sort of process of your work? And now with Cloud Island, where would you locate it somewhere in one aspect of, not of your body of work, but for instance in a relation to the sound, a relation to the type of camera work, or is it something else? Is it, yeah.
Okay. Well, I suppose there are several ways I can answer that question. Firstly, I suppose I do see this piece as related or indebted to things like cinema verite. So, where the camera is just trying as much as possible to be, the famous fly on the wall sort of thing. This is maybe in many ways like too well shot to be of that sort of rough and ready, style of life as it just happens to be happening. But at the same time, as I did say, I am trying to just record what's there and present it to you. And so, there's that. For whatever reason, I don't know why really, but I really do feel that if you see that as two fields and a fence in between, and one side's documentary and the other side's more movie, then I definitely feel that I fall on that side, on the documentary side. That's where my affinity lies. That's sort of the films I like the most, and come from there. And what do I want to say? It's sort of a very grey area. Where does the one stop and the other start? Particularly these days, because I think actually it's great. It doesn't bother me at all that there's sort of this mishy-mushy area in between where you're not quite sure whether is this a movie which has been strongly influenced by documentary, or is this a documentary which has been strongly influenced by cinematic movie techniques, things like that. I think that's all great if it all makes work better. And I think I'm sort of playing a bit of the field on both sides of the fence these days, actually, because there are other works of mine like A Lapse of Memory where the location is totally documentary, but I'm working with an actor within that area. So I'm working in a very cinematic sort of way, and I wrote a script and the whole thing. And yeah, I'm actually working on a feature length. I don't call it a spiel film, I call it a film spiel because I'm playing with documentary and movie with that as well.
One of the reasons why I raised that question, that'll be my last, because I think the half hour is over, where I said I'd open definitely open to the audience, is that if it's not, it doesn't, when I said you worked with an archive, with the archival images, it was, the documentary was also about the document, not just the process of documentation. And these images are, the other thing is that there is a notion of an identification of the documentary image with the sort of the rough image, right, the not composed image. Mm-hmm. Now these are highly stylized, right? There is also a whole, I think there's an interesting question of the relation of the beauty, the beautiful, like the aesthetic image to the aesthesis, to the perception of what is then conceived the documentary. There's a tension in there, I think, just because of how we are trained.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very interesting field to explore, and that's why I'm talking about this very grey area in between where does the one stop and the other start. I mean, it's all documentary is a setup. Put a camera in the room and it changes reality. There is no such thing as cinema verite, And at the same time, you can watch a film from the Maysles brothers or from Fred Weissman or, I don't know, I have to name some German names, really good documentary German filmmakers from Cologne, and you'll think, yes, this is true, this is authentic, this is real life, and that's also extremely valid. And I totally agree with you. Documentary and document and archive. That's also totally where I'm coming from. And I often say that the very early, and the other thing also is that all material from archives that I've worked with is of documentary nature. I've never ever worked with movie material. It's just not my thing. I often used to say that this very, very early footage, like some of the earliest documentary film footage shot, was my film school, because I never studied film, but I sort of learnt about it and started thinking about it by watching hours and hours of this silent, beautiful material, which no one knows where it came from quite often.
Questions or comments? If there are none, then I will continue, but I'll try to look at you if you jump in, because there's one, I think it kind of follows up on this question of, do you speak Japanese? How was the, sorry, that's an opener. I should have opened it before. Is the question of text and context. I started by asking the context of the installation, since the two sort of properly sort of documentary films, as in made with television money for a cinematic screening. You work with installation, but there's also another question of context, and in this case, there's no commentary in the work itself. There's no subtitles for when they're speaking, then, but also all that, the question of sort of delivery of information. Now, is that also something, do you get, I mean, I find it very logical, because I find it's almost tangible what they're saying, or that it's often, it's not that it's not important what they're saying, but this kind of murmuring to yourself is like a bodily gesture for me, which is not, since I don't understand what they're saying, maybe I'm not doing justice. But because, so since we're not reading subtitles, when the woman's pointing to the photographs, we're forced to look at the gesture of pointing and of which photos she highlights. It's also interesting that there are photographs absent. It looks like they're being torn out, or it's used photo album. What's your relation to the contextualization in terms of information? Is that then also part of an installation that you'd provide, that you find it important? Do you think it's not something that is necessary? Maybe it's a super simplistic question.
No, it's okay. There was something I did want to get back to, so it's good that you've come back, because I can talk, just pull me back in if I get sidetracked again, about why I present works in installation. I mean, there are most of my work actually is of a spatial nature that makes it absolutely impossible to show it in a cinema. I mean, quite a lot of my works have been shot with the camera on their side, so you could only watch it in a cinema by getting a neck ache, or they're multi-screen, so you just can't show it here anyway. The other thing is that I'm cautious, or I have been unhappy with having my work placed within a film program, and that always happens if it's short films, because you put it together into a longer program, and so things always get thematized under a particular way or in a particular. And I find that narrows the way that you perceive a work. It's also that I then also lose control of how my work is then, or some control of how my work is then placed and read and perceived. And the other thing is that some of my works, a lot of my works are non-narrative, so there's no beginning and no end, and some of them are very deliberately circular also. So in an installation situation, they are looping, and you cannot see where the loop starts and where it finishes. This piece does have a beginning and an end, which is why I think that for a situation like today, it's okay to show it here like this. But something I also have problems with is that cinema can be a bit like TV. It's sort of quite disposable. It's something you watch once and that's it. It's just sort of in and out. You forget it instantly. I like to be able to control the spaces with which I present a work, because then I can also have more control over this situation, the way you respond to my work, I hope. Now, back to what you were actually asking about information, yeah? And
I'm just sometimes, because it is, there is, we all know, I mean, we're not, in this context, we're not talking about sort of conventional documentary, right? That is all about providing information in a sort of
but you
type
also,
of
I think you're
voiceover.
also talking about like exhibition information, or like, is there a leaflet or is there a text on the wall, stuff like that. That I don't have any titles in this is because I show it in an installation setup, and because I just don't think it's necessary. I also don't think it's necessary that you know the name of the island or the name of the people, so I just don't put it in. And this is a freedom which I happily take. If it had to be for television or something, then they wouldn't let you do that. But I'm my own boss in this situation, so I can give myself that freedom. The other thing about how much information do you give, I find it. I'm increasingly unhappy, actually, with the amount of information which is given in museums and situations like that. I mean, it's all well meant. It's meant as this to the public, as a way of helping them, as a way of explaining, educating. The problem is that, I have quite a few problems with it, but it too often narrows the way you perceive a work, because people sort of walk into an exhibition space and the first thing they do is read the little, thingy on the wall, or the big thingy on the wall, and right, okay, yeah, got it, okay, look at the piece, yep, off, on to the next one. Quickly first taking a shot with their mobile phone. So they haven't actually opened themselves up to the work and to the experience of looking at a work at all. And I find that a real shame. And the problem I have with it is that you walk into exhibitions and increasingly they look like pages from a catalogue. It's like the texts on the wall are sort of been made so they fit into the catalogue. You can just read the title of the exhibition on the photo in the catalogue, sort of thing. And that's what the function of a catalogue is. And the exhibition is a much more multifaceted, complicated beast. It's something you should walk through, experience, backtrack on, have your own way of dealing with.
It's interesting, though, that you said that you see a more disciplined, or that you have more influence in sort of creating a sort of type of disciplined body of perception in the exhibition space as opposed to the cinema.
Well,
because most
disciplined
people
but
always
free.
Say,
I mean, I also offer freedom, because I don't say...
Yeah, that was the wrong word. I mean, conceptual...
Controlled, maybe, whatever.
I would like to ask something again about the portraiture, and so come back to the notion of time in terms of now you've worked. What is striking, if one knows about your earlier work, is that the gaze isn't. There's one exception, I think. The woman with the glasses and she's showing the album in pink lipstick, I recall, and she's the only one who then faces the camera. Here it's different, and it's often what struck me is that I said that before, but that people are framed in a way that there's sort of they're part of the entire structure, because there's something of the sort of the objects or the landscape in front of them, in the back of them. It's almost a very peculiar framing.
Well, it's more a portrait of an island. It's more a portrait of a landscape. So the framing of the people is actually, I'm inclined to say, sort of more over shoulder. I mean, an over shoulder shot is that you get to see what they see. So it's giving them their point of view. I didn't actually even think about it so much when I was conceiving and making this work, but I just felt that this is what I wanted to do, and that was necessary here.
Yeah, because they are so part of the landscape. There was a question here somewhere, please.
Hello.
Hi.
You explained that with this project, it was your wish that by watching the piece, one can get as close to the impression as to be there. And as you told yourself, that's of course an illusion. And I'm just wondering if you have been seduced yourself of breaking this illusion, at least in some tiny little moments or elements.
Well, there are some breakages in the film in itself, in that it's not all sweet and flowers and nothing's going on, because I mean, all of a sudden, there's this building site going on, and you can tell that change is coming. A work is a work. You can't say everything and do everything in one piece ever. I didn't have the need to sort of expand it any more than it already is. I must say that because I'm now in the opportunity to go back, I'm sort of toying around with the idea of whether I'll do a Cloud Island 2 or 3. I'm not quite sure what the number should be, and that would be quite a different piece probably, because I would actually probably give it more back to them and say, okay, this is what I made. What do you think? And what would you think I should have made? And then maybe give them more of a say in how it should be done, or maybe have that whole negotiation process more in part of the work. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm a little bit nervous about that idea at the same time, but well, I'll see. I can always just do it, and if I don't like it, just don't finish it.
Did they not try to direct you while you were there? Because I mean, it's just a small community. It seems kind of tempting, and it's their place.
No, there are a few things. When on the day I arrived, we had an afternoon tea party. So the whole island turned up, and gave them tea and cakes, and I explained what I was doing. And the main characters had been asked beforehand if that was okay, that we could, concentrate on them. So they were already, sort of prepared. And it was more Mrs. Tsugita, who was...
is that the one with the bike?
Yeah. She's a very, very bossy woman. So, she'd have comments to say no matter what you did. But that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, please, Luke.
Okay.
Hi, I enjoyed the film. Thank you. You said that you had a researcher looking into who the main protagonists would be. I was wondering what their job ordinarily is. Presumably, that's not their normal job. So, what their job is in real life, and on were they choosing the criteria, or did you stipulate the criteria, and what was that criteria?
Okay. I had... I'm just trying to remember exactly. The main researcher I had works at the gallery in Tokyo that I work with. So she knows my work very well, and she's not an experienced film researcher. But I could guide her quite clearly, I think. What were my criteria? It's a bit of a hard one to sort of go into right now. I can't really sort of pull it all up. Obviously, it's an open door, but I wanted them to be happy that they were getting this attention, that they would be open to being like the main characters in the film. I wanted there to be a mixture of men and women. The guy, he's the youngest of them all, and he's the chief of the village, basically, the village representative. He's the one who's in the uniform and then goes and fixes stuff. He's a fixer. And once I knew that, I thought, right, need to have him because he will bring me from one place to the next. And he was very involved and very positive about the project because he wants his village to stay alive. So, these were all good reasons. And then, the fact that he likes to sing and likes to sing karaoke, I didn't know about that, but that's fine. And he's not a great fisher. I sort of made him do that. But that has to do with this. I'd watched quite a lot of old Japanese movies to sort of get in the mood. And there's a beautiful Japanese movie from this area called Naked Island. And it's black and white, it's from the 50s. There is no dialogue in this film. I can highly recommend it to anyone. And it's this even smaller island than this one, and the island is like just a mountain. And there's one family living on this island, and there's no water on the island. So the mother and father, there are two boys and a mother and father, and they have to row over to the mainland every day to get water for their crops on the island. They're incredibly poor. And you just live with them and follow their daily life. And this was a really important film for me. And there's this particular way in this area that they have of rowing, which has reminded me of Venice a bit. But they don't do it with poles. They have this one rudder at the back, which they sort of wave. And so I just wanted that. I wanted to sort of quote that film, and I wanted that for this very particular area. And so beforehand, I'd got my researcher to check, is there someone on the island who fishes? Is there someone on the island who has a boat? Is there someone who... They all have boats and they can all fish, it's part of their life. And they can all do that. They can all row in that way. But he didn't have a boat anymore, so he had to borrow someone else's boat and went out with the neighbour, and then the row thing, the oar broke, so we had to get another one and all the rest of it. 3 o'clock in the morning, mind you. Most of the stuff is shot about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning because it's too hot and the sun's too bright otherwise. But people get up early there. Sorry, I'm off the track again. People. Mrs. Sugita, that's the old bossy lady with photo albums. I felt she was a bit like the conscience or the memory of the island. She knew everything, kept everything. She was quite well educated also. And so the scene with her with the family altar at the end of the film, I presumed that she would do something like that. So I got the researcher to check, and she did. But she did it much more than I was expecting. She does it every morning and religiously for half an hour. And I thought this was sort of important things to have, and that she did have photo albums that sort of, I don't know, people can be quite predictable in that way.
That you wanted archetypal acts?
Archetypal, maybe, but things that were real, things that were of their life that they did anyway. Or would have done anyway. And then, as I'm saying, documentary is always staged. So you know, they could do it. They have done it, and they do it for the camera. For me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. I was really engaged actually in the drift of the Brendan's Isle story before
and got cut off. Yeah.
Yeah, we just arrived there for our 2 days when
he had to go home. Yeah.
But I would like to say thank you for a great presentation, also Nanna, a lovely conversation, but also for the film. And what I wanted to ask a little bit about is the notion of not neutral observation, but a very sensual observation within the film. For example, watching somebody rearrange their dentures in a way which also tickles me in a kind of intimate fashion, the proximity to the act and to the observation, or the shot where our fixer sings for the first time, in both a staged and the way he trails off.
Yeah, the trailing off is real.
Beautiful, of course.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, and this is the sort of balance you're always trying to get, I think, in documentary, that you set up a situation which allows life to happen in front of the camera for you. I think I was really lucky that this island is full of those sort of opportunities. Firstly, it's great to film old people, always beautiful and always somehow rich.
Always?
Well, I'd say so, yeah. A lot of the time. The other thing is Japanese people, incredibly polite. Come in, have a cup of tea, you know. No doors shut, no locks anyway. You know, so it was. I had access. I had absolute access, and
tell me a little about that idea of the specific sensuality of their. Because I'm actually thinking of one shot which stands out, which is Mrs. Uchiguchi,
Shugita, yeah.
Where she's got her pink lipstick on, really ready, and it's a straight-to-camera shot.
Yeah.
With her hat on, which is about her bestowing herself to you and to the camera in a way.
Yeah, but she makes herself up every morning anyway. Right. She's that sort of a lady, you know. She's very proud. I was actually trying to figure it out myself. I think, you know, obviously, another open door, looking is never neutral. So filming should never be either, can never be, by virtue of the fact that there are always people involved. And I don't really know, I don't really know why it became also essential, but it had to, obviously. Somehow it was just sort of so much there and so much. I remember, actually, maybe this will help. I was filming with a Dutch crew. I actually was thinking beforehand whether I should film with the Japanese crew, and because I was thinking, you know, they'll be able to help me out when things are maybe a bit tricky, or where I'm being really a barbarian, doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, asking the wrong thing at the wrong time, and all that sort of stuff. But I was also nervous about that they might not understand what I want and all the rest of it. So in the end, I ended up working with a Dutch film crew, and I prepared them as well as I could beforehand. And then when we arrived on the island, the cameraman said to me, like, "Oh yeah, I filmed in a monastery once where all the monks weren't speaking." And it was also one of those, you have them in the south of Holland and some of them in Belgium, where there's only a couple of monks left. So it's sort of like the last generation. And also some of these monasteries are where they don't talk. So, you know, very fixed pattern of daily life, and all very sort of, then you start looking and listening very carefully. There's no chattering going on all the time. And he said, yeah, when he started filming, this monk opened a door and he opened it so consciously and so carefully that he looked at that and thought, and by the end of the couple of days, he was opening doors like that. And I think that's what happens to you in an island like that. You do just sort of somehow, it takes over, which is actually fantastic. I sort of almost get a bit homesick when I look at the piece.
But thank you for showing it, and also good luck with the presentation with the at the island. Love to hear how that goes.
Thanks.
I think that's a nice. I also just got the sign. I think that was a nice thank you note, and we come to an end. And I would thank you, Fiona.
Thank you
for coming, even though
Thanks.
you were so ill for the past week, and thanks to the audience. And we'll hand back to the organizers.